Congress. Yeah. Congress gets it. So I mean, it's the same exact story. But they also, and you've touched on it here, they also want to make everybody in Washington, and this is Woodrow Wilson 101, the administrators have nothing to gain, so they're good guys. That gives them the power to distribute wealth and to have welfare systems. Which, what is the road to serfdom? What does that even mean?
Well, when he talks about the road to serfdom, what he's warning about is that people think that there's a way to centrally plan an economy or run a society or engage in some sort of planning that doesn't involve methods that we would find utterly distasteful and barbaric. And that, in fact, what you think you're doing is bringing about prosperity for everybody. What you're instead doing is moving us along a road that can lead to places nobody wants to go to, all in the name of providing everybody with security, just like a serf. A serf had security. He was going to be fed. Sure, he's stuck on the land. He can't choose his occupation, and some other person has an initial claim on his income, but he's not going to die.
Right.
And so in exchange for that, you get security.
And the reason why Europe didn't mind serfdom is because they had come out of slavery. Serfdom, we view as slavery, not hard slavery like early 20th century, colonial America and the rest of the world, not in chains, etc., etc. But serfdom was slavery light. It was you work, you do your own hours, whatever. You just give me the bushel of grain,
right?
And you can marry whoever you want, so it's not slavery. But that's kind of the system we're creating here, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and it's starting to come apart, especially as we see in Europe. A lot of these impossible promises that governments have made, all with supposedly good intentions, are coming apart. And in the meantime, the citizens have become so tethered to government, they don't know how to live otherwise. So now we're going to start to see riots across Europe. The possibility that people in their 20s, in their teens, could have a decent life is being destroyed by systems that are going to require these kids, because of the aging of the population, to work until they're ready to drop dead. They will never be able to retire, and the system's going to collapse anyway. And if anybody thinks that a few speeches delivered off a teleprompter is going to fix that, then the government schools are worse than we thought.
Let me ask you this, because I cannot convince 80% of the country, 90% of the country, even people are on my side, that there's no difference between the socialists of the Nazi regime and the socialists of the communist regime. Isn't he the first guy that said, there's no difference here? There's no difference.
He has a chapter in the book called The Socialist Roots of Nazism, which is a very unfashionable thing to say, because we all think that National Socialism is about wearing funny hats and having a swastika. But he's getting to the root of what is it really about. And what it's really about is a hatred of the old classical liberal, by which I mean free market order. That's what it is, hatred of. And that's why it was very easy for people to move from one party to the other, be a communist one day, a Nazi the next. What you share in common is the common enemy. You hate the free market. You have to engage in some sort of planning. And, of course, Hitler, it wasn't too difficult for him to find what his enemy would be.
See, here's the problem. And, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day. To understand the reaction of 1913 and giving us the Fed, you have to understand the collapse of 1908. To understand that one, you have to understand, what was it, 1893. I mean, free markets come up and they collapse. They come up and they collapse. It's a cycle. But that's how they get you. Because they say, we're not going to have that. Don't worry about that. We're going to take, that was the promise of the central bank. We're going to take all that risk out.
And yet what's interesting, Glenn, is that what they always do is they create these problems and then they pose as the ones who are going to solve them. If you look at the period from 1873 to the time of the Fed, Canada is not actually having bank panics. So how come in the U.S. we see them again and again? It's because of regulation, it turns out. More regulation, less stability, believe it or not. At the state level, many of the states imposed unit banking laws, said every bank can have only one office. Well, that obviously makes every bank extremely fragile and undiversified. So when it came time for the Great Depression, 9,000 U.S. banks failed. You know how many Canadian banks failed? 0. And it's not because Canada had a central bank to rescue them. They didn't get their central bank till the mid-1930s. So they give us the phony narrative, and then they pose as the saviors, and people go for this.
When we come back,